Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty, a program coordinator at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, an associate professor and program director at Divine Mercy University.
So let's catch up. You have been in the North Woods.
I have, almost entirely away from tech.
Wow. So what could you use there?
We had Wi-Fi, so I had my laptop with me and a couple of things, but I really tried to avoid it. Really wanted to kind of a digital break for a little while. I did get on and check some email and those types of things, but signal's not any better than 4G-ish, so that's really all I could do.
Yeah. My son is currently, I mentioned, in the North Woods of Wisconsin, and he arrived late last night. And he texted me for two purposes. One, to let me know he does have access there in case anything needs to happen. He's got an iPhone, so we can do satellite if we need to. But that was one. And then two, to let me know that I said, so what do you got? What's your signal? And he goes, well, I've got 5G, but 1 bar. So I said, okay, well, enjoy the large horseflies and the mosquitoes, and I'll see you in a week. He and I are both presenting together at MacStock. I'm doing a couple of presentations, and that's going to be in Northern Illinois. So his fiance, who's with him, is flying back to Cleveland on Monday, and I'm picking her up at the airport to bring her back to Kent. And then he is flying from Wisconsin to Chicago and flying into O'Hare, where, of course, Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock is the best time to pick somebody up at O'Hare Airport.
Absolutely.
So I'm picking him up there. I have someone who's driving with me, who's a passenger with me, and so we're going to navigate getting around O'Hare. I thought of some things he could do, like maybe he could, go to the car rental lot, and I could pick him up there. It'll be easier than having to pick him up. But all of that's going to delay time in getting him. So we're going to go ahead and try and do the terminal pickup with him. And I hope it is not a terminal pickup, but it's a successful pickup with him at the airport. And then we have the joy of taking outbound traffic to the suburbs, the Northwest area, at 5 o'clock. So I just imagine it's going to be a mess. And then I present the next morning at 9. So anyways, that's going to be my week. So we'll talk after the show, see whether we can squeeze another show in somehow before I have to take off on Thursday. But that's what I've got finals this week, and so I'm started administering them today, and I have to get them done and graded before I go. So that's what my next week is going to look like in terms of my trips. And you're going to be comfortably where you're at your home, kids and everything for the rest of the summer?
Well, we got a couple of trips planned. So my son and I are going to visit Epic Universe for his birthday we leave the 13th of July. We're going for 4 days. And then in August, we'll take a trip to the beach in Rehoboth, if you've ever been there.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
I worked in radio in Myrtle Beach and would go up to Rehoboth all the time, or Ocean City, Maryland, excuse me. I also worked in Myrtle Beach and would go up to Rehoboth all the time to get away from Ocean City, Maryland.
Right.
But it's a very cool area up there.
Yeah, a little more quiet, a little more calm. So
today we're going to talk about reference managers and what reference managers we've used and how we have. And I'm going to get started with some tips, and maybe you and I can go back and forth on the tips that we have in the show notes. I think that whether by choice or by force, the first tip is pick one and stay with it. I picked EndNote purely by accident years ago when it first came out and have stuck with it over the years. And there's some of that I regret because of the cost. It's kind of expensive, but there are other ones that are simpler and available for folks to use and less cost restrictive than EndNote. And we'll talk about those through the ways. Zotero is one of them. It's simple. I found, because I've tried them all at some point, I found that Zotero kind of a challenge in terms of organization. And Mendeley, which you have more experience with, integrates well with PDFs. So you could try both, but then when you get one, stick with one and stay with it.
Yeah, I mean, experimenting is fun. Take a look at all of them. But, one thing I'd recommend is making sure that it has a browser extension. So it has something that you can use as you search. It was actually one of my biggest problems with RefWorks, which is another tool that I had tried. And a lot of times universities will offer it. They include it as part of a library package or something like that. I think it has more to do with, library services and how they contract for that. So some universities will have that. The big issue I had with it was there was no browser extension at the time. You could only use RefWorks really if you manually input those references and kind of brought stuff into it, or if you were using their database. So you were searching through the university database. There wasn't like a library links function at the time for Google Scholar or anything. So those browser extensions make things a lot easier. It helps you grab the citations, the websites, the information, and sometimes even the PDFs will get pulled along with it. So, look for those. Zotero and Mendeley have them, and I think make life a lot easier.
Yeah, we had one that we had at our university for a while, and I can't remember what it was. But it was like, everybody needs to try this out. And I tried it out and I started doing some work on it. And then I found out a couple of things. Our students also found this out. You could use the account as long as you were at the university. If you wanted to take that account with you after you graduated, then you had to start paying for a subscription fee for the management service. So it felt like a bait and switch for a lot of our students. And so I dropped out of that process. And I'm not exactly sure what they're using at Kent right now, or even if they're offering it at Kent right now. I might try to find that out and share that with you in the process. I'm not people perceive me as kind of a spacey guy. That might not come as a surprise to you, Eric, but sometimes I'm just like all over the place. But there's one place in my world where I get a little obsessive, and that's around organizing stuff on computers. And so one of the suggestions with these types of reference managers is structure your library. I happen to structure mine by project. So if there's a chapter or an article that I'm working on, now that means if I'm working in the same topic area, I'll have a folder with stuff on online teaching. And then when I do a chapter a couple of years from now, there's some of those sources that are in the online teaching folder that I have that I want to copy over and put into the chapter folder that I'm working on because I'm going to use it. So I do like to organize it around particular topic areas. For me, I primarily use this for scholarship and for writing. And so I don't use it for other things like developing courses and things like that. But I organize by folders. I've never organized by tags. I think there's a lot of stuff to have to remember in that level of organization, at least for me. But I do get a little obsessive about things working right when it comes to computers.
And you want to be able to find things. You know what I mean? It's not a real great reference management tool if you don't know where things are. And if you're anything like me, you drag and drop stuff in there and then say, "Oh, this will be great to get to later." And then later doesn't come for a while and you forget where things are and where they go. I think one of the most useful functions that you'll get out of these are pulling the data from the PDFs themselves. Sometimes that works better, or at least as well as pulling it off what you'll have with the browser connector. So when you pull those in, have it extract the data. Most have an auto extract function. But, kind of a caveat, make sure you check that. It can make some minor mistakes when pulling from PDFs, especially if you notice that document is a scanned PDF. It has some trouble recognizing the text and you'll notice some issues. But it is helpful. It does help you pull things in.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I use EndNote for is I have one folder that's all articles that I have published and chapters that I published and book references where I have published. And it becomes, when you do that, you can, simply you can search. One of the ways to start that is to search your library database, and then you get a downloadable file, a text file that you can put in that will then populate your reference manager with all those references. So when I'm doing a research project, I'm searching, I'm moving articles over to a folder in my library reference system, and then I'm going to download that folder with all those references to import into my reference manager. The other thing I do is I grab the PDFs for the articles along the way. It used to be a bit of a hassle to get all that stuff 10, 20 years ago. Now, often the library in the citation that you found will have a link to how to get the PDF or how to get the HTML file of the full document. Mm-hmm. And so what I'll do is I'll get the references and put them in a folder, and I'll also download all of the PDFs that I can. So when I populate my folder in my reference manager, there is a section in EndNote, and that's what I can speak the most of, that allows you to add attachments. So those attachments are the full article. So you will never see me carry around a stack of papers or articles, because as I'm working on the document or working on whatever I'm creating, I can just open it directly from my reference manager, and there's the article that I can use to read through, to highlight, whatever I want to do with it. Mm-hmm. It's part of that. Well, I've done the same thing to catalog stuff that I've published that has been in my name, because, and I don't know, I started it just because I wanted to see what I could pull up from the library that had my name attached to it. And then it was like, oh, let me grab this article. Let me get this article. There's some journals that I published a lot in early on in my career, and I could get the PDFs right directly from my desktop right here in my office, instead of running across to the library and photocopying it or asking for them to pull the reference for me from somewhere or get a copy of it from another library. And I started building that up. And I go back every once in a while with my Vita, and I'm reminded about things that are in my Vita that aren't in my EndNote database, and get that caught up to date with my publications. So I have one folder that's just dedicated to that. So when somebody says, can you send me a copy of this article? Or if I need to pull that article out for an example or to share it with somebody, I know where I can find it. I don't have to do a full search on my computer to find the PDF of the article that I wrote. It's right there in EndNotes. I don't do much with Cite while you write. I know a lot of people do that, and I don't know if you've had experience with it, but I don't use it as much. It's a function of, I think, most every database manager now. It used to be kind of a premier function for reference managers, but I don't know. Have you used Cite with you, right?
Yeah, I've used it a couple of times. I don't know. Maybe I just, because I got in the habit of writing my own, like it does. So in-text citations really aren't that complex, So yeah. For me, I feel like it's almost too laborious to even use. It's easier for me to write as I go. I do like the bibliography, though. I do like the reference list. I think that's a great function. Those take forever to write and to format properly. And I think they've gotten a lot better than they used to be in terms of taking that data and creating a good reference list for you to use. I couldn't speak to MLA much, but at least for APA, I think they do pretty well.
Yeah, and at least with EndNote, and that's the one I've been working on for years now. Mm-hmm. It has a pull-down menu of what kind of exported citation version do you want? Do you want MLS? Do you want Chicago? Do you want APA 7th? And when APA went from 6th to 7th, that was a patch they put in, so things came out in 7th. I use that probably more than anything else of it. I don't do Cite to your write. I think the advantage of it is if you do Cite while you write, you're going to make sure that your in-text citations will line up with what shows up in your reference section. Whereas if you don't use it, like you and I don't, then it's always this cross-referencing we have to do. Okay, it's in the text here now. Are we sure that I've got it in the reference section? where that
Right.
populates it automatically. But I know students who use Cite with you write, and graduates of our program who use Cite while you write. So the one-click bibliography is what it's all about. When I first got to use these, that was the thing. I just hate writing, hand typing references into it, and this was just so much easy. The difficulty with collaboration for me is there are not many folks that I know that pay for EndNote. So when I do collaborative writing, that means I have to switch to Mendeley, which is okay. Then I populate that with what needs to happen. But that database in Mendeley is far, if I were to open it up, it would be, oh yeah, this specific project because I wrote with this person, or this specific project because I wrote with this person. Most of the stuff that I do individually, though, is in both Mendeley. Well, it's not in both Mendeley. It's primarily an EndNote. And I'll port over the Mendeley stuff into my EndNote, so I know I have that there too. But I don't know. What else can we say about it?
Well, collaboration wise, I don't think I use it much for that either. Even with Mendeley, if I need somebody to see something, there are good export functions within the tool that help, but I don't know that I've used it really much for that.
Yeah, when I've collaborated with Mendeley, it's for the purpose of having a single place where me and my co-author or authors can put things in that we were going to write about. And that also means at some point we divvy up the task and it's like, okay, I'll review it for flow. Can you review the reference list just to make sure everything lines up? And so they have access to the complete reference list, and it's easy to collaborate that way. And it's easy for them to contribute to the reference list, whereas they can't do that when on EndNote unless they own EndNote too, or we're sharing it in some way that way. So there's one of the tips here that I kind of disagree with. Deduplicate your library. I don't really care if I have multiple citations, similar citations in different folders. Doesn't matter to me. Because the way I organize the writing by folders and by particular topics. But, keeping your library tidy, I have a tendency to duplicate a lot of stuff, so I have multiple files on my computer and blah, blah, blah. And at some point, I always download my database, so I have a copy of it. So if something happens and I can't use it a year from now, at least it's only a year old instead of losing it. So I have a tendency to oversave stuff for that purpose.
I might have you beat. So I teach research and assessment a lot, and I have a guide that I really like for validity and reliability. It's kind of just a 3-page summary of understanding validity, reliability, and statistics.
Yeah.
And I went to search it on my computer because I post it in courses all the time. And I think I had a dozen saved in different spots. My computer, organized by which courses I was using them for and whatever. So I have a tendency to duplicate things all over the place.
Well, and the thing is, it's easy to find then because you don't have to go to multiple places. It's always there wherever it is.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Something that was in the tips that we kind of listed to talk about that I think really helps. I like the annotation feature in Mendeley. I like that you can go in, annotate, highlight, save your changes, and that stuff is backed up in the cloud, so you can use the desktop version or the web version to see the annotations.
Yeah. Which
is really nice. I like the desktop version because that's how I started using it, although it does look a little bit different than it was a handful of years ago. It's still, I feel like, pretty intuitive. But that's a neat feature that I do like.
Yeah, I can say the same thing about EndNote. I like the desktop version better than I like the cloud version. And it is available, I think, in both formats. The syncing, a bit confusing, particularly if you're setting it up on multiple devices. So if I have it on my desktop, then I have it in the cloud, and then I also have it on my laptop. It doesn't always sync up as easily as it could. But I do like the interface better from the app version than the cloud version in terms of that. But it's important to keep these things synced to the cloud, whatever version you have. And I've put in, I've changed machines like I change underwear. Well, I change machines probably more than I change underwear. But when I do that and have a fresh machine, of course, I have to load the app on it if I'm going to use it for scholarship. And then I have to get the database from somewhere, and that generally means syncing it with what I have stored in the cloud. So keeping that up to date, and for God's sakes, not forgetting your cloud password. I did that once, and it was like it took me forever, and then finally figured it out and did the recovery of it on a new machine, and that was very helpful. So, yeah, let's go into the different kinds of software, and I have these links in the show notes. So, we talked about Mendeley and as a reference manager, and we have the link to that where you can create an account. You can download it as an app, and then you have some premium options to sign up for premium. Is this the cost version of Mendeley?
Yeah, so that's if you want more storage and like the premium features. Anyone who listened to this before knows I'm cheap, so I've kept it clean enough that I haven't needed to pay for it. But I can see the reason for it, particularly if you're gonna house a lot of stuff there. I tend to take projects out and put projects in.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at, and I'll share this too for people who are watching this on the web. Zotero also is, you can download the app and start working with it. And it gives you some examples of how it's being used within particular, like this is a dissertation example that Zotero is. But they also have upgraded storage. So you can get 300 you get 300 megabytes for free, 2 gigabytes for, and the 300 megabyte, I would imagine the 300 megabyte is kind of just a little too little. You know what I mean?
Some of that's intentional, yeah.
Yeah. So it pushes you then from 300 to 2 gigabyte. It doesn't give you a 1 terabyte or doesn't give you a 1 gigabyte version of it. It gives you a 2 gigabyte version of it, in which case your cost is $20 a year. And then 6 gigabytes, if you're going to do that, it goes up to $60 a year or unlimited for $120 a year. So
and if you're being cheap, remember to save your PDFs as a reduced file size so that you can keep the file size small. So you can open those up if you have Acrobat and save them as a reduced size PDF, and that'll save you a little bit of room.
RefWorks. And have you worked with RefWorks much?
I have. So that was the one I was talking about earlier, because I think they're owned by ProQuest. Yeah. So it often comes as part of a library package. Universities will offer it. I wasn't a huge fan though, and generally it's harder. It was more difficult for me to import things. One of the comments I saw the most when I was looking up research for this show was that people don't like the interface. It's less intuitive. And that may be because it has more of that web page feel.
Yeah. I was confused when putting this together because stuck in my mind when I saw RefWorks, I thought, okay, I've heard that name before, but for some reason stuck in my mind is Reference Manager. And I tried to search for Reference Manager. Nothing came up. They kept taking me to RefWorks. And I then did like more of a perplexity search asking, was there ever a citation manager called, and I put in quotation marks, reference manager? Because I have a distinct memory of I've been working with EndNote for a long time, and then reference manager came along. It was cheaper, and I had faculty in my program. I took them down to a computer lab and I said, I want to show you this because this will be helpful. And this was early on when people were still copying and pasting old reference Word documents to get things into the new thing. I said, let me show you this. And I did this hour-long thing on how to use Reference Manager, and I didn't see it come up in any of the searches. So I did a search for it and found out, sure enough, it existed. It was one of the earlier ones. It was Windows and Mac, which is probably why I thought this is a good thing to share with my colleagues, because EndNote, I think, is primarily just Mac. And it was bought by ProCite, and both it and ProCite were bought by Thomas Reuters, who is the owner of EndNote. So they basically bought it and killed it. And, there goes Reference Manager. So that was my experience trying to recall this. I was real excited about it too, and probably would keep running it if I knew it was around and existed. But you can't even, they stopped selling it in like 2015 and they stopped supporting it in 2016. So it's been gone for a long while. The one that I use is EndNote, and you can see it's prompting me to buy EndNote 2025. I'll have to log in and see what the deal with that is. Generally, upgrades come every couple of years, and they come with a upgrade option for the previous versions. And sometimes it's just, sorry, your version is way too old to count, so you just need to completely buy the new version. And I'm sort of trying to figure out, before I go ahead and hit the login, trying to figure out what I'm getting with this new version that isn't just new window dressing from the older versions I've had before. So, it's just new wallpaper on the same engine. But the thing is, I'm going to need it, because I'm going to need it if I'm going to continue on this terrible addiction that I have to EndNote as a reference manager.
There was one additional that I wanted to mention that we didn't have in the show notes that I came across with GPT's help, and that's PaperPile.
Okay.
I don't know if it's new. I don't know anything about it, really. I looked up like features and pricing, and it advertises itself as a no-fuss reference manager for the web. For what I understand from GPT, it's primarily integrated with Google Docs, but indicates it can be used with iOS, Android, or Word, which I thought was kind of odd. So this is one that
it's working. So if it's not, and I pulled it up, if it's only working on iOS, then it's not working with Mac OS.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it feels like it's web-based.
Yeah. So I guess it would work wherever it is. It kind of looks like it's web-based too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. That looks awful appy in terms of what they have.
That needs to be a tagline for the show. Right?
That looks awful appy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I think we've covered most of the reference managers and talked a little bit about how we've used it. And I know we were going to go into that, but I think we're going to be redundant if we keep talking about it. Take a look at the show notes and see if there's anything else you want to add in.
No, I mean, there was something, just kind of a curiosity. Somehow we ended up, both of us, looking at the history of things. When I was looking up Mendeley, one thing that came up, they were bought by Elsevier, I think is how you pronounce it. Elsevier. I don't know.
Yeah, I buy some books from them for diagnosis and psychopathology.
Right. So publication company primarily, I think. There were a couple of notations in GPT about privacy concerns being one of the weaknesses with Mendeley. I don't really know what that means, but it was what came up as potential issue when using something like Mendeley. So it was funny that we kind of came up the history. It showed, when it was purchased and that there had been some comments and concerns around privacy.
Well, I don't know I don't know enough about the background of EndNote to see what the privacy, or to know what the privacy concerns are with EndNote. If people want to know what I have in my reference manager, go at it. Have a good time,
Yeah, enjoy.
You will be bored. You will be bored. My only suggestion, I said this earlier on, is select ones that are sustainable. So don't pick reference manager because it bit the dust. And it was like they were very clear in the article that, the company bought it, EndNote bought it, or eventually the company that owns EndNote bought it and decided to focus all their energy on EndNote. And they brought on the EndNote guy to make decisions. And they, ProCite and reference manager went a different way. So yeah, pick one that's sustainable, and then also start early in your career. It's never too late to start, because it'll be a useful piece of software, even if you've been writing for years and you've been doing different kinds of ways of managing your references, even if they're on index cards and you hand type them in or whatever. This will be a great way to save time and productivity. And once you start to use it, you'll really enjoy using reference managers around your scholarship or whatever else you want to use it for. So if you're a doctoral student and you're listening to this and you're starting your career in research and scholarship, then by all means, you should start working with one of these now. Maybe even try two, and then eventually decide which one you're going to put all your time and energy into.
Yeah, and you'll notice you tend to write around areas that you're interested in. And as you start to build that library of kind of seminal research, things that you cite all the time, it'll always be there. You can get rid of bookmarks, you can get rid of those PDFs saved on your desktop or in a folder somewhere. It's searchable, it's easy to access, and it can help you as you start to develop and the idea is to continue to write. And if you're going to publish on the same topic over and over again, you're likely going to use some of those works over and over again. So it just makes your process so much simpler.
Well, we probably should crank another one of these out before I head to Chicago next week, and we'll talk about a time to do that offline, maybe Wednesday instead of Thursday if we can pull that off. But as for now, you can find out all about us on thepodtalk.net. That's our website. And if you want to have questions or contribute to the conversation or straighten out some things that I've told you that turned out to be wrong, well, then there's the podtalknetwork@gmail.com as our email address. You can look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast servers. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast, from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Look for our other shows like Circular Firing Squad and a new show on spatial computing. I can't say it's a new show. This show, we've gotten 60 episodes of our show, Tech Savvy Professor. We are at 59 on Vision Profiles. So it's weird because I put show numbers in, and when I produce one, it's like, wait a minute, no, it can't be. And then it's like, no, it's just like this. But Vision Profiles, it looks at spatial computing, and maybe we'll have that as a topic here in terms of spatial computing and how to use that in a teaching setting. So look for the other shows like Circular Firing Squad we do on Sunday nights, every other Sunday, to have conversations around counseling topics and life topics. We try to keep it light and have some fun with it. And you can find all that at thepodtalk.net. Now that's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.